The member for Wills.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. When I asked the people of Wills to give me the privilege of being re-elected as part of an Albanese Labor government, I made it clear that I was committed to taking real action in government, getting things done. That's what we'd do if we won government. Real action on the cost of living, real action on secure local jobs, and of course real actions on tackling climate change. And I campaigned on the fact that an Albanese Labor government was committed to taking that real action by implementing our policies and legislation to lower our emissions, create thousands of clean energy jobs and decrease household bills with massive investments in renewable technology to make us a renewable energy superpower. During this first sitting of the 47th Parliament, we are making our commitment to real action clear and manifest with the introduction of the first genuine climate action legislation after more than a decade of inaction. The Minister for Climate Change and Energy nailed it in question time when he said a decade of inaction is over. There are a lot of platitudes in politics and the conversation about climate action is not immune to that, that's for sure, Deputy Speaker. Those on the other side who like to promote a false, rather damaging dichotomy that it's either the environment or the economy, as if you've got to choose. Or from the minor parties and those on the fringes that think we can wave a magic wand to deal with climate change without a genuine plan for workers and the communities that they support around Australia. Deputy Speaker, the country has been crying out for sensible and real action in this space for a decade. And, Deputy Speaker, we are delivering it. And I'm very proud of this bill because it's the first real climate change bill in a decade. We have had 9 years, almost 10 years, of wasted opportunities and those opposite dithering and in denial, delivering 22 so-called energy policies, all of which were abandoned when they started fighting each other in their own party room and could never agree on one of them. It was a disaster, Deputy Speaker. And the Australian people had enough of it, had enough of the dithering, had enough of the denial, just had enough of it, wanted things to get done. And Australians trust that we will get this right because Labor has a strong track record of environmental policy and we have the commitments to prove it. Let's not forget, Deputy Speaker, it was the Whitlam government that was able to prevent Joh Bjelke-Petersen from drilling in the Great Barrier Reef. It was the Hawke government that was able to save the Franklin, the Kakadu and the Daintree. It was the Keating government that worked to protect our oceans. But we don't need to look at the past anymore because it will be this Albanese Labor government that will be remembered for taking real action on climate change and protect our environment for future generations. And our commitment is backed up by a fully modelled and costed plan in Powering Australia, a plan to reduce emissions by at least 43% by 2030, joining our international partners like Japan, South Korea and Canada in that ambition. A plan to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, bringing us into line with countries like France and Denmark and Spain who have similarly legislated targets. It's a plan that reflects Australia's commitment to the Paris Agreement and the efforts to limit the global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees on pre-industrial levels. Rejoining our international partners in this effort is not just important in doing our fair share to reduce emissions. It is actually critical to our long-term bilateral relationships, our engagement with our partners across the globe. And already under the leadership of Prime Minister Albanese, this government has made significant strides in repairing relationships that were damaged by Australia's lack of leadership in the previous government. No longer are we the subject of ire from our international partners who expect us to do our fair share. And of course, this is a principle, the fair share, which is somewhat similar to the fair go. And it's a principle that Australians easily understand. Do your bit. Put your fair share in. Make the effort. So we're no longer speaking to empty rooms at international conferences. We're actually bidding to host them. We're no longer leaving our Pacific neighbours, our friends, our partners in the Pacific, on their own as they experience the devastating impacts of climate change, the existential threat that they face. We're with them now. We will not be limited in our ambition, and as the Prime Minister has said, our target is a floor, not a ceiling. We will become a renewable energy superpower with the investment that will be unleashed by our policies and our legislation. And we will be accountable, unlike the previous government, when it comes to this action. This will take the form of an annual climate change statement to Parliament, ensuring accountability on meeting our targets, including progress made in achieving those, international developments relevant to addressing climate change, and the effectiveness of the government's policies in meeting the set targets. This statement will be informed by the Independent Climate Change Authority, who will also be tasked with providing ongoing advice on adjusting future targets. We have a plan to create hundreds of thousands of jobs, secure, well-paid jobs. And this is important because it's not just about words or just about a so-called just transition with nothing really to back it up. Our plan is to lower power bills for ordinary Australians, helping more Australians join the solar revolution by installing 400 solar community batteries around the country, connecting 100,000 Australian households who may not be able to install solar, like apartment owners and renters, to draw from excess electricity stored in batteries, allowing for more Australians to take full advantage of cheap solar energy. Now, I know the people of Wills in my electorate have felt really, it's interesting, I probably share this with most of my colleagues on this side when they talk to their constituents, that they tell them they've got a sense of relief. It's like a weight has been lifted over off their shoulder, that they finally have a government that is actually doing something in the national interest. That's a widespread view. It's nationwide. We have a federal government that actually cares about this country's future and future generations, that's committed to taking real action here in this place and in our governance. And it's brought together all sectors of civil society, the unions, the business sector, environmental groups. All of them joined our minister when he formally signed our new targets in June this year. And so I congratulate the minister for his efforts, the Minister for Climate and Energy, for his efforts to develop legislation that recognises the significance of this challenge, whilst bringing the different elements of Australian society together, including here in this parliament. And I thank the members of the crossbench who have sought to negotiate in good faith and call on those yet to declare their support to consider the bigger picture. I also call on members of the opposition, the handful that are here, that are still opposing this legislation, to reconsider, because we have a unique opportunity to end a decade of fighting, a decade of denial, a decade of delay. We have a unique opportunity to chart a new path forward. We have a unique opportunity to do something inherently good for the people that we represent, something significant for the people we represent and future generations. On election day, Australians voted to end the climate wars. They'd had enough. Our Prime Minister spoke eloquently of the possibility of a better future, the potential of a better future. And now this parliament can do the same. We can vote to end the decade of delay and denial. We can vote to mark the end of our climate delinquency.